Hi guys, coming to you on this Taco Tuesday to talk about meat-free meals. I've been getting lots and lots of questions lately about how to incorporate meals into your daily routine that don't include meat. With the COVID-19 pandemic, we're starting to see some areas that may be potentially having a meat shortage, and that is causing a lot of stress and panic in folks, especially those who are not used to eating vegetarian or vegan, or just simply throwing in a meatless Monday every now and then. So I want to give you some foods that you are probably familiar with, but maybe don't put them together this way, but that can give you the balanced nutrition that you need. So I don't want you to be afraid of not having meat. There's plenty of ways to get the protein that you need, the vitamins and minerals that you need without having meat on your plate. And so what we're going to start with tonight is some black bean tacos. So when we look for ways to replace meat, we have to look for a plant-based protein substitute. And beans are a great one, legumes and lentils, nuts and seeds are all great ways to get plant-based protein in there. And then protein lives in other things as well. Whole grains have some protein in them, so it's really about filling your plate with a bounty of ingredients and just swapping out some of the things that you would normally use a meat for by changing that out to perhaps a bean or a legume. So let's get started. We're going to start with some garlic and onions. These are two ingredients that pretty much start the majority of my meals, because we want to lay down layers of flavor when we start to cook. Hopefully what you'll see is that these recipes are not difficult. They're not complicated, and they don't take a ton of ingredients, and you can still get big, delicious flavor with fewer ingredients. We just have to build in some things. So we're going to start with some fresh garlic. Of course, if you don't have this, no biggie. You could absolutely add, some additional garlic powder to the skillet when we get to that point. But we're just going to start. So I've got a whole bulb of garlic here, and I'm just going to turn it over so that the hairy end is pointing up and the nose end is pointing down, and just lean into it. And now I've just kind of busted it open and made it a little easier to grab some of these cloves. Okay, I'm going to grab one of these little bowls just to be kind of my trash bowl, keep things a little tidy in the kitchen. And this is a fairly big clove, so I'm going to do just 2 of those because they're big. If they were small, then I would do 3. And then to get them out of their little skins, what we want to do is just lay them on the board, and then take your knife, lay it flat, and give the garlic a little whack. It's right out of the paper there and ready to go. Now, there's lots of different ways to slice garlic. If you're not super comfortable with a knife and you have a garlic press, you could absolutely put this garlic into the press and just squeeze it and have some minced garlic that way. I'm just going to give a couple of chops. I'm going to take my garlic, and you'll see there's a head end, or I guess that's a booty end actually, so the tail end of it there. And I'm just going to take my knife and I'm going to give it some little slits through there. And then I'm just going to turn it a little bit. I'm going to keep the tip of my knife on the board and my fingers tucked in, and just kind of rock back and forth there. And now I've got some little garlic mints. And I'm just going to repeat that with the other clove. So in some long slits, turning it, and getting some mince there. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to take some of these little bowls. You don't have to dirty all these dishes. Absolutely you don't. If you have a bigger cutting board, one thing you can do is just kind of move food to the side of your cutting board. You can throw it on a paper plate if you like. But before I start to cook, especially something that's going to have a lot of chopped veggies and things like that, I do like to chop everything first and kind of have it ready. That way the skillet is waiting on me to get over there and start things, but once the process gets going, I'm not worried about what's in my skillet burning before I get the next ingredient ready. So I'm just going to pick that garlic up and slide it over into my bowl there. Okay. Next up, we've got an onion. And so when we look at this onion, again, it's got kind of a nose end, and then it's got kind of a fuzzy, hairy end on it. And depending on kind of how you want your onion sliced, depends on how you're going to cut this, but I want it diced because I'm trying to keep everything relatively the same size. And so what I want to do is not cut this way. Then I would have half the onion with the tail on it and half the onion with the fuzzy end on it. I want to cut it this way so that both pieces of the onion are going to have this root end on it. Okay? See, I've still got root end on both pieces. And so now I'm turning the onion to the flat side down. And I'm going to get rid of this little piece here and peel this outside layer off so I don't need it. Okay. But I've still got this root end, and very, very similar to what we just did with the garlic, I'm going to give it kind of long cuts one way, and then I'm going to turn it and give it a cut the other direction. So now I've got nice little dice going on here that I can cook with tonight. And this is a small yellow onion, whatever onion you have on hand. If you had a red onion, that would be really good in this as well. But just use whatever you have. You know, recipes, especially, you know, if you're baking, it's harder to substitute things because baking is a little bit more temperamental with baking powder and things that are going to cause lift and rise. When we're doing, you know, a stir fry or, you know, these tacos, sub in things that you enjoy or things that you don't have right now. You know, if you didn't have garlic, that's fine. If you didn't have white onion or yellow onion, use a red onion. If you don't have any of that, use a spring onion. I do tend to buy onions in bulk because I use them so much. If you're not going to use them, then you can chop them up like this and throw them in a zip top bag and put them in the freezer and just take them out as you need them. That's actually, I have some red onion in there right now that I did last week. And that makes getting dinner on the table even quicker when you can kind of prep those ingredients ahead of time and have them waiting on you. Taking those putting them in another little bowl. I tend to not put my garlic and onions in the same bowl because the onions are going to need a little longer time to cook than the garlic, and I don't want the garlic to get too brown or too dark because then it'll give it kind of a bitter taste. So I'm just going to set those over to the side there. And now it's whatever veggies you have on hand, right? So I have an extra zucchini, but you could absolutely use a yellow squash here. You could use mushrooms as well if that's something that you wanted to use up. I eat mushrooms multiple times a week, so I left the mushrooms out tonight because we had mushrooms last night. So this zucchini here, I'm just going to cut the ends off, right? And then let's talk about how we're going to cut it up. You can cut it up however you want. You could make half moons or any of those types of things. I'm going to cut it in half this way just to make it a little easier to deal with so it's not rolling around so much. And then I'm just going to take just a little piece off the side so that I can turn it over, and now it's super stable, right? If I'm trying to cut on this, it's wibbling around everywhere and it's just going to be more dangerous, okay? So now that I've got it a little bit more stable, I'm going to take and just make some long cuts this way. And then you can even turn it over and make them the other way, okay? And really what I'm trying to do, once I get some little batons, so to speak, is line those up and just give them a little dice across. Okay, just so that you've got a little dice, not too fine. Don't want them kind of disappearing in my sauce. You know, I'm not trying to be perfect. Just trying to get things in similar sizes so that they all cook at relatively the same time. And the last one I have is just a couple of Roma tomatoes, and this adds some moisture to the kind of taco filling, as well as some nice acidity to it. You could absolutely, if you didn't have these, you could just kind of stir in a couple tablespoons of prepared salsa if you had that, or half a can of canned tomatoes would be fine in here as well. And so I'm really just going to give this some slices. And then I don't really like to waste anything around the stem, so it's not pretty, but just try and chop some of those up there. And then I'll just line up a couple of these and give them a chop through as well. And if you want these finer, that's fine. Do it finer. You can always come back in and give them a little additional chop. Especially if you have someone who's not a super big fan of tomatoes, they'll kind of melt in a little bit easier. And I really love my big knife I have here because I can use it almost like a bench scraper to move things around. But absolutely you have on hand will be just fine. Just make sure to keep those fingers tucked out of the way. So I've got lots of fresh veggies. Give my board a little wipe down, as well as my knife. When I'm done with cutting, alright. So now we've got all of our prepped veggies and a can of black beans. So these are just regular canned black beans that I drained and then rinsed really well. So you want to get all of that kind of thick, starchy, dark liquid off so that you've got just the bean. Pinto beans would also work really well right here. Kidney beans, anything that you really enjoy, or a mix of all of those would be just fine. All right, so we've got our veggies. Now I'm gonna grab some heat. So I've got a gas burner and a skillet. And before I put this on, I'm gonna give my pan a little spray with some olive oil. Not a ton, starting with a non-stick skillet, okay? And that's about all the oil that I'm gonna use. What I'm gonna use as things maybe start to stick to the skillet is just some water. You could also use veggie stock, something like that, to keep things from sticking. All right, I'm gonna put us on about medium heat and let that come up just for a second, let that start to get a little warm. And I'm gonna start actually with the onions. I'm just looking for it to kind of start to shimmer a little bit. That way I know it is getting warm enough. I'm just gonna throw one little onion in, so it's not warm enough yet, I know. So now I'm just gonna grab some salt and pepper as well to have here, because I wanna kind of season things as we go along to get the most flavor out of these ingredients. All right, so I'm starting to get some sizzle. So I'm gonna throw those onions in. And give them a little move around in the skillet. Ooh, they smell good already. You know, when you get a little bit of oil and a hot pan and things like onions and garlic, man, it just starts to smell good in here already. I'm not going to add any salt and pepper to them yet. I'm just going to kind of let them sit for a minute because I want to get a little bit of brownness on there. If I salt them too soon, it pulls the water out, or the liquid out of the onions, and you're going to get more of a steam and less of an actual browning on the onions right now. I've gotten a little bit of color on there. I'm starting to see some kind of little brown bits coming up in there. That's where the sugars are coming out of the onion and starting to kind of caramelize. So I'm going to add a little bit of salt here and a little bit of pepper as well. Now that my onions are really kind of starting to soften up more and I've got some good little brown bits going on, I'm going to add in my diced garlic. You can see there's not much oil in the pan at all. There's a little bit of liquid coming out of the onions. But a lot of folks would dump some more oil in or some butter or something like that at this point. And it's really not needed. We've gotten the flavor from the oil at this point, and we really just need things to help not be stuck to the bottom of the pan. So you can just get a little bit of water in the skillet. It's going to start to pull up some of those brown bits from the bottom that got stuck. Really lay in some good flavor into these onions. Those are really starting to get some good color on there, so I think we can move on to adding our zucchini. So everybody in the pool. Zucchini overboard. Those cook a little bit. I'm going to give them a little bit of salt as well. And I'm just doing a little bit of salt, guys. Not a ton. But again, that's going to help pull some of that water out of the zucchini, help it get nice and soft. This is where I wanted the onions to get kind of brown. I want the zucchini to just soften up. We tend to worry about salt in our diet, and we absolutely should pay attention to how much salt we have in our diet. When we have too high of a salt intake, it can contribute to fluid retention and high blood pressure and heart disease, and we absolutely don't want that. So when we look at where salt comes from in our diet, it is largely from processed foods, so things that have had a lot of salt or sodium added to them in the preparation process to keep them shelf stable or make them last longer. With tacos, one of the things that we look at is the taco seasoning mix, and that has a fair amount of salt in it to start with. And so choosing a low sodium variety works, or the really simple mix that I showed at the beginning. Just a couple of spices hanging out in the cabinet, mixed up together in a mason jar, and it's ready for you. Alright, so you can see we're kind of running out of oil and juice, right? We'll start to stick soon. I'm going to let it go a little bit farther because I kind of want some of those brown bits at the bottom. And now I'm just going to give it another little splash of water. Pulls all those good drippings up from the bottom. Helps that zucchini steam a little bit. I'm also going to go ahead and stir in our tomatoes and the juice. Goodness, it looks so good. Smells good too. Wish you could smell it. And we'll go ahead and put in those beans. And now it's time to season it up. So going to grab my taco seasoning mix, and remember I like mine spicy, so mine has cayenne in it. And I'm going to start with about a tablespoon of that and stir it around and see how we're looking. I've got a lot of veggies in here, so depending on how big my onion was or how big my zucchini was, I might need a little bit more. full tablespoon, about another half a tablespoon of that seasoning in there. Turn us down a little bit. Now, a squeeze of fresh lime over this would be really good, or you could just, if you're gonna set out like a taco bar or like a build your own taco, which is a great thing to do when you have, you know, eaters who like different things on their tacos, is you could absolutely just go ahead and set out some fresh lime wedges and squeeze those over the top of your tacos. Wow, this is looking so good. Cut it all the way. All the way down, just barely on. A little bit more water. So all total I've used probably about 3/4 of a cup of water for this whole process. So while this makes excellent tacos and burritos, it also works really well to build like a taco bowl. So if you just wanted to put down some rice in a bowl, add some greens, and then add this on top, gosh, that would be so yummy. Alright, I'm gonna turn it off because we're done cooking that. I mean, that was quick. It was easy. It's going to be delicious. I'm going to serve mine with some soft tortillas. I've actually got some shredded cabbage that I'm going to add a little lime and some shredded carrots too. Have like a little coleslaw, as well as some roasted corn on the cob. And that will be what rounds out our meal tonight. I hope you can see that it's quick, it's easy. You know, there's no meat involved in this, but I'm still going to hit my protein needs from this. I'm also going to get a couple of things that I'm not going to get if I had used meat here. I'm going to get a ton more fiber, right, which improves heart health. It decreases the risk of colon cancer. And I'm also going to get a ton less fat, in particular saturated fat, and it's going to be cholesterol free. Right? Cholesterol only comes in animal products. So since I've used no animal products in this particular dish, this would actually be considered vegan. But don't get hung up in labels. Just concentrate on making plants the focus of your plate. And you really can't go wrong from that. I hope you give this a try. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it fills your belly, warms your heart, and kind of eases some of your fears that you're not going to be able to feed your family if you don't have meat on the plate every single meal. You gonna stand here?
Action.
Go away.